So it is definitely good to be back with Jujutsu Kaisen. It's been a while, but hopefully Akutami is doing well. It's good to see him back though, and it seems like he's ready to come out swinging with a lot of different things in preparation for the culling game. Just for complete clarity's sake, the month-long break that Akutami had was indicative to his health. He was on and off being sick, he was severely overworked, and they decided that an indefinite hiatus would be put in place for Akutami, which is a very great thing. So to see him back, thriving, more lively than ever, and ready to get things rolling once again is a great feeling. For me personally, Jujutsu Kaisen has such an addicting weekly reading experience, one that is very tailored and tempered to a specific degree to enhance it tenfold, and it's something that thrives within that weekly reading experience. And that's not to say that it would be worse in a bi-weekly or a monthly, but Akutami very purposefully writes the story around that weekly experience. It's something that definitely takes a lot of finesse and obviously has a lot of pressure and overwork surrounding it. So hopefully he's able to kind of digest it at his own pace and at a healthy rate, to put simply, because obviously that's what comes first. As great as the weekly reading experience is, I would be perfectly fine with him taking multiple month-long breaks throughout the year if that's what it had to come to. I know a lot of people would think differently about that, but at the end of the day, we all enjoy the same story, and what comes first is Akutami. And the only way we're going to continue to enjoy that story is if Akutami is within good health and is ready to smash everything out once again. With that said, coming off a month-long break, he did not hold back all too much. A little bit here and there. It is a very simple setup chapter, straightforward, to the point, and that's more so because the previous chapter was the conclusion of the Maki situation. That was very high and elevated and escalated beyond belief. The Zenin family, the power-up with Maki, and bringing all of that to a conclusion, we were within a transitional period. Obviously, this whole sequence is setting up for the culling games, bringing characters into specific power slots, positions, location, etc., considering we are only 9 days out within the story to the start of the culling games. I think the last person that we have to grasp around is none other than Hakari, and that is exactly what is going on here. This chapter finally introduces the quote-unquote controversial character that is Hakari Kinji, who has evidently been redesigned. I'm not entirely sure why, but that tends to happen a lot with characters, and maybe it was easier to go with this design, or maybe he wanted to avoid an outer controversy with demonizing his previously designed character. Obviously, there's a much bigger and thought-provoking kind of psychoanalyzing process that you can take that down. I don't necessarily want to go down that path just for simplicity or length's sake, but do know that Akutami most definitely has the best intention. As simple as this chapter was, they're great for giving you such a different perspective or experience on a character's point of view. Does that make sense? So as much as we get the Megami and Yuji combo looking for Hakari and going out of their way to join his little gambling fight club that he has going on, it sets all of these stones up not only for obviously the culling games, but for Hakari's introduction. It's a very slow way of doing it, but the more you get through the chapter, the more you kind of realize that, okay, this is probably the controversial nature that Hakari has, that he is a suspended Jujutsu sorcerer third-year student that is running a fight club mixed with gambling, mixed with Jujutsu sorcery fighters, mixed with human spectators. You are kind of breaking every single rule that the Jujutsu world upholds, and that is probably the worst thing that you could do. I doubt he would actually be let back into the school, but knowing how the story is going currently, it probably doesn't really matter. The school is kind of the worst place that every character within our main cast could actually be, because the Jujutsu higher-ups cannot be trusted. They have a very specific agenda, they have a specific way of doing things, and every character within our main fold is currently going against that. And once they actually even get close to Gojo whatsoever, they are kind of deemed traitors as well. They will most likely be put on a hit list, but I don't know what people the Jujutsu higher-ups could actually implement. Do they have their own bounty hunters? Do they have their own people that they can call upon? Because they did call upon Yuta, and look how that turned out. And here we are. There's also a nice little surprising thing in here with Panda. I didn't expect to see Panda anytime soon, but I'm glad that he's kind of brought back into the whole picture because he was very anonymous. He was floating around after all of the emotional stuff that happened with him, and I was wondering how we would attach him back to the main cast of the story. I assume his intention was to also get closer to Hikari and bring him towards the main cast, but obviously Panda stands out like crazy, being a panda, and probably couldn't get close to Hikari by any degree. He's very reclusive in that regard when it comes to Jujutsu sorcerers and just the kind of idled position that he is within. So he's very concerned about the people that get close to him, which does make me want to bring up the other character that we get shown, known as Hoshi Kirara, I believe her name was. I'm just going to call her Kira for short, who too is also a third year from Jujutsu High. We realistically know nothing about these two characters. Thanks to Megami's words, Kira supposedly has a very weird or OP ability. We don't know what that is. I assume it has something to do with reconnaissance or spying or something along those lines, or just some sort of alert system that would ping the radar of Megami and Yuji being within this fight club and trying to get closer to Hikari, but that's just brief early speculation. It could be anything really. It could be something else entirely, which wouldn't surprise me. So Megami does all this talking to get into this fight club that Hikari has. He doesn't get accepted, but Yuji gets accepted to fight, and they go into this fight, which is a very cool kind of location set up and how it's depicted, which is like a parking lot, and the bottom floor being the fighting pit, and then the top floor being collapsed in and viewing downwards is like the observation area for all of the humans and people gambling on these fights. This is where Panda comes into play, and Yuji and Panda go head to head, and obviously they're surprised by this fact, and people aren't really excited for this fight because they feel like Panda is going to win. But then Hikari's surprised when Yuji plays to the audience to the fullest of extents. Obviously Yuji and Panda know what they have to do. They're both trying to get closer to Hikari, and Yuji puts on a very incredible show in front of all of these people in the best way possible, which piques Hikari's interest, as that's kind of the main goal, is to stand out throughout this whole situation. This works inherently well. Hikari's baited, he's hook, lined, and sinkered basically, and he has this very high interest towards Yuji, being his next fighter and someone that he can write these scripts for. This fight club is broken up into two different fights. You have the real fights, which anything goes really, and people gamble on it, but then he also fixes the fight, which he calls scripts, where I assume he just writes out the fights, and the fighter would have to do whatever that entertainment value would be to make it obviously super crazy, and to take a dive or to take a hit or to be this explosive, etc., you know what I mean? So he's manipulating everything. He's pulling the strings for this entire fight club gambling situation extremely well, and it seems like he's profiting off it very well. As much as I would have loved to seen a little bit more for the Panda and Yuji fight, the whole point of it is that they're kind of just sparring to begin with. They know each other's goals and what they want to do, obviously getting closer to Hikari. So the fight itself being showcased not so in the most glamorous of ways is perfectly fine. I think it's pretty standard to skip past all of it. It's not all too important, and we see enough of it to get an idea of what's going on, what Hikari values, as this whole chapter is kind of framed around what is Hikari, how he acts, what he values, and what he wants. I'm very curious on how far this goes, however, because they definitely do reiterate how much of a jerk Hikari is, so I'm wondering if the personality we see is only a pocketed portion of what it could actually be. Does he have a temper problem? Will he blow up in front of Yuji or Megami? Mind you, Megami is also sneaking into this situation using this stealthy shadow form that he has, which is great to see him kind of expanding upon his abilities, or at least utilizing them in a very grounded way, which is very nice to see. Everyone's obviously evolving and taking the next steps to reach this newfound power, especially with the Culling Games, and Akutami's doing his best to balance everyone out as much as possible without singling them out and spotlighting it and forgetting about everything else. He's doing it at like a shared progressional rate, which is really nice. I do believe we're going to spend a bit of time with Hikari and Yuji and Panda and Megami, as well as Kira, because I do believe this is kind of the last thing we actually need before we get into the Culling Games. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this lasts till very close to the Culling Games before they meet up once again, unless we switch over to Yuta and kind of check out what he's doing ahead of time and what position he's putting himself within. We could also see some more Culling Game sorcerers or members, if you will. We have a couple couple at the moment which have been singled out and headlined as very unique individuals, so I wouldn't be surprised if we got a handful more. But spending time with Akari and building his character and taking the slow stepping stones for it, it's going to be a nice change of pace to balance this hype and anticipation properly. We have to slowly build it up once again. Whether he joins or not alongside Kira is going to be another question in itself. He doesn't seem like the person that likes to cooperate, but he may get forced to. Honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if he tries to fight Yuji or Panda or Megami at the end of it. And now that I say that out loud, that could definitely be a thing. Looking at his smug self, I forget that he is genuinely one of the most powerful characters within the story. So he might actually fight all three of them, which I don't necessarily think balances out, but obviously they don't want to obliterate each other off the face of the earth at the moment. That could definitely change over time, but he may be impressed with their fighting prowess, and hypothetically, maybe that is what he is impressed with. But he seems like more of the monetary type, so maybe the Culling games would interest him in that regard, in finding a loophole and adding a rule that allows him to gain such said monetary value that he wants. I'm not entirely sure. But I thoroughly enjoyed this chapter. I thought it was super simple, but a very purposefully great way to get people back into the story at a nice rate. It's not overwhelming, it's not crazy, chaotic, it's very comfortable, it's with characters you know and love, and we're starting to build that hype and anticipation once again. Of course, the peak of it is most definitely Hikari, and everything surrounding him is going to be a very cautious endeavor, which I'm more than highly anticipating to take part in. So with that being said, that is basically it. Let me know how you felt about the chapter. How do you feel about Akari, his redesign, Panda's reintroduction, the small fight that Yuji and Panda have, maybe Megami's shadow clone, or even the brand new woman that we got, Kira. A lot of great things, a good start to Akutami's return, very slow and methodical but worthwhile. This is the building blocks for the Culling games as we get closer and closer towards it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. With all of that, I want to thank you all for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water, new video every 3 days, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.